Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about how Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is going to be the Nintendo Switch 2 launch title, according to a leaker who has gotten a variety of things right this year about Nintendo, and how this might make more sense than many people may realize. I understand there's a lot of people who do not believe in Metroid Prime 4. There are many people who don't think this makes sense. There are many people who are going to be disappointed and upset if this ends up being true. But I do think this is going to be a good thing. I think Metroid Prime 4 would actually be a fantastic launch title for Switch 2. And so that's what I want to get into today. But before going forward, let me take this moment to ask that if you do enjoy my content, to please subscribe and hit that notification bell. And if you're unsure, watch through this video and then decide. So this apparent leak is coming from Samus Hunter. Now I will summarize because I feel like I always have to, because there's always someone who hasn't really been paying attention to the Samus Hunter Chronicles or whoever it is that's been saying things as of late. But yes, Samus Hunter does have a shaky past before the year of 2024. We go a few years back, they said some things that were correct, they said some things that were wrong, it was spotty, they got a lot of criticism and feedback, and they essentially stopped leaking things for a long time. But in this year of 2024, they came back. They teased Emil the Smiling Man Famicom Detective Club shortly before it was confirmed that it would be a Famicom Detective Club game. They were correct. They teased Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition shortly before it was announced. They were correct. They teased a Donkey Kong Super Nintendo World Direct shortly before it was announced. They were correct. And they even said some other things that other insiders have also kind of agreed with. For example, Samus Hunter did follow up a report about when Switch 2 may be coming out from Nintendo, where they were saying June to July. Samus Hunter also threw May into the mix, and then shortly after that, Nate DeHate had a podcast where he also suggested May might be a part of the launch window. Now, more recently, it feels like people are kind of siding with June as the specific month. But the point is, there have been other people who have seemingly said similar things to Samus Hunter after Samus Hunter said it in regards to the launch window of Switch 2. There has been reason, at least in this year of 2024, to take Samus Hunter seriously. Now at the same time, there have been other things they said that have yet to have been proven true, and when a lot of things are being said, I tend to get a little bit more skeptical, but enough has been said, and nothing's been wrong, so I think we should at least continue to have these conversations about what they're saying here, and this is what they're saying now. I wish you a happy holiday season. Spend it with those you care about most, and relax that soon after, there will be lots of good information to discuss. What am I going to do? I won't be hunting space pirates. For that, I will wait until Switch 2's launch day. And so there it is. They are very clearly saying that Metroid Prime 4 Beyond will be the launch title for Switch 2. Continuing though, but I will play some Metroid Prime Pinball to get some practice in and visit some of my space pilot friends to wish them a happy new year. Now this part seems a bit more cryptic. When they talk about getting some practice in regarding Metroid Prime Pinball, I think maybe they're suggesting that something about Prime Pinball could have something to do with Prime 4. What that might be, well, your guess is as good as mine. Now, as for the part where they might visit some of their space pilot friends, perhaps this is suggesting that there are going to be other hunters in Prime 4, which we already know there will be one in Sylix, who was initially introduced in Prime Hunters, which has several other hunters, so maybe there will be several hunters in Prime 4, and that might be an important talking point here as well, which we'll get into a little bit later. So some people are going to disagree with this purely because they think 3D Mario or Mario Kart would make much more sense as a launch title for Switch 2. And if it wasn't for Samus Hunter saying this, I would agree. But I think it's worth noting here that a few days ago, Samus Hunter did say that 3D Mario and Mario Kart would not be launch titles for Switch 2, and they also went on to talk about that it's more so about Nintendo coming out with consistent quality content starting from day one and consistently moving forward, very similar to Switch. That is the main reason why Switch saw so much success. And so from that perspective, maybe we shouldn't put too much stock into the day one title alone. we shouldn't be thinking that the day one title alone needs to be the sole reason why the Switch 2 is successful. The Switch 2's success will be a product of everything. It will be a collective effort. And so even if 3D Mario Mario Kart are not the launch title, if Nintendo has some pretty good launch titles day one, and then soon after there are other big titles and they continue to do that, and that eventually includes 3D Mario and Mario Kart within that first year, then Nintendo will likely still be very fine for the Switch 2. They're not going to sell over 10 million consoles day one, so 10 million plus sellers day one aren't necessarily needed. You just want something that's going to do pretty well and get people invested early on. I think there's some reasoning behind this, and we've also talked about recently how maybe Nintendo wants to make sure they have one big Mario title for the holidays of Switch 2, presumably holiday 2025, so maybe that's where we see 3D Mario or Mario Kart. But they also might want to have another big Mario release to close out the fiscal year and also close out their 40th anniversary celebrations of Mario by the end of the fiscal year, March 2026, which also is right before the release of the Mario movie in April 2026, so maybe they fit in another game, either 3D Mario, Mario Kart. They're kind of interchangeable there. Point being, there may be some points in time where Nintendo wants to have some big Mario titles, and so perhaps they don't want to rush into the big Mario stuff immediately and use other high quality titles to kick off the Switch 2. And so from that perspective, maybe it's not 3D Mario, maybe it's not Mario Kart, but some people would think it still needs to be something that would be a more popular seller, even if there aren't that many Switches at launch. They used Breath of the Wild to push the Switch at launch, they used Twilight Princess, another Zelda game, to push the Wii at launch, and Metroid's just not as big as Zelda. No, it's not. But there have been times Nintendo hasn't used things as big as Zelda or Mario to push a new console. Look at the 3DS with Face Raiders and Steel Diver, for example. Now, the 3DS did not have a successful launch, so maybe that's not the best idea, but I think that many would agree that the combination of Metroid Prime 4 Beyond and maybe another cool casual title like, say, for example, Switch Sports Resort would be a much better duo than Face Raiders and Steel Diver. Especially if these are the launch titles day one for Switch 2, there's also a great deal of strong third-party games coming out day one, and soon after, there are other bigger titles to continue that Switch 2 momentum as opposed to us suffering through a drought with just those games. And while Metroid is not as big as Zelda or Mario, something interesting about Zelda is that it wasn't that big of a series until Nintendo started to push it as the big launch title for some of their more successful consoles. They pushed Zelda Twilight Princess, and it became the best-selling Zelda game of all time for many years until Breath of the Wild, the next big Zelda launch title, and then the series reached an even greater height of 30+ million in sales. So I'm simply saying that before Twilight Princess, the best-selling Zelda game was Ocarina of Time, around the 7 million mark, but prior Zelda games were in the 3 to 4 million range if they were doing pretty well, which is still better than most Metroid offerings, but point is, Metroid could have an opportunity to grow here, and maybe Nintendo sees that. I do believe that they are pushing this game. You look at how they treated it as the June Direct closer, and this game has been a significant investment. They've been developing this game for years, and Retro Studios have been hiring so much AAA talent over the years. It might be hard for Nintendo to turn a profit here, or as much of a profit as some of their other entries, if this game doesn't see as much success as possible. So definitely, we think Metroid Prime 4 should be a cross-gen title for this reason. But if we're already talking about Metroid Prime 4 being a cross-gen title, all of a sudden it starts to feel a lot more similar to how they treated Twilight Princess and Breath of the Wild. So while we don't expect Metroid to become as big of a seller as Zelda, it might still reach a new level that would still be satisfactory in bringing in a decent amount of attention day one alongside something like Switch Sports Resort, with other games following soon after. But here's another interesting angle to consider here. We keep hearing that there's going to be a lot of strong AAA third-party support. And if Nintendo comes out guns blazing with their biggest best sellers right from day one, Nintendo might run a little bit of the risk of overshadowing some of the games at launch. Nintendo, based off the kind of support they know they're going to have from day one, they may not feel compelled to put out their very biggest guns right from the get-go. And so that might lead Nintendo towards putting out something a little bit lesser in terms of overall sales potential. Enter Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, maybe Switch Sports Resort as a combo, which is still really good, I would say. And then you have other things like Elden Ring and Dragon Ball Sparking Zero and things along those lines that will bring in a large audience onto Switch 2 early on. But something else I've considered before when it comes to Metroid Prime 4, especially when we think about it as a launch title, Metroid Prime 4 might help to send a particular message about Switch 2. Well, a couple different messages. One might be improved visual fidelity. If we're talking about Prime 4 being a launch title for Switch 2, a vastly more powerful console, and it also being a cross-generation title, while they didn't do this for Twilight Princess or Breath of the Wild, in this case I think it would make a lot more sense to improve the visuals significantly, and I think they could. Metroid Prime 4 already looks incredible as a Switch title, and so I don't think those who want to buy it on Switch are going to be disappointed with that offering, but I do think it could certainly be improved on Switch 2, and that might help to sort of showcase some of the visual improvements on Switch 2. But something else I want to talk about here, and perhaps the bigger, more important point, maybe, this is me theorizing here, is that maybe Metroid Prime 4 Beyond has online multiplayer. And this goes back to the tease Samus Hunter may have been providing in terms of the hunters being involved, and that is me certainly making some stretches here for sure, but I do think it makes sense, and it's not the first time we've considered that Prime 4 might have multiplayer. Now, me being a hardcore Metroid fan, I think they need to prioritize a single player campaign. They need to make sure that that effort is a total masterpiece. And if that part is a total masterpiece and there's still room to expand in terms of multiplayer, then go for it. I think if you can get both done, sure, just not at the expense of the single player. And some people like to assume that this would be at the expense of the single player, and I just don't think they would do that. I mean, you look at Metroid Prime 2, it had multiplayer, and while the multiplayer may have been a little bare bones, the single player was still a total masterpiece experience. And Metroid Prime 2 isn't even the only multiplayer Metroid game. There is also Metroid Prime Hunters, an online multiplayer game. And then there is also Metroid Prime Federation Force, an online multiplayer game. So I do think that there is some decent history of multiplayer for Metroid, and Nintendo may see an avenue here to go in this direction. And the reason why I think this might help Metroid to be a bigger fit as a launch title is because perhaps the overall message regarding Switch 2 is that it's going to be something that can play games, all of your awesome Nintendo games, all of those really cool indie titles and things you expected on Switch, but on top of that, a lot of strong AAA third-party support, as has been reported and rumored by many different places at this point, and that's going to include an overall better online focus. We've recently seen some evidence to suggest that the Switch 2 Pro controller will have a headphone jack. We didn't have that on Switch 1, and I think that's kind of important because with the headphone jack, what does that facilitate? Better online voice chat. And when we're talking about better AAA third-party support, what do most AAA third-party games tend to have? Online multiplayer. This is more of a standard across the industry, and so perhaps Nintendo might be looking at Metroid Prime 4 Beyond as a very interesting fit for this transition over to Switch 2. It's a big game that has a pretty big budget that's going to be a high quality offering. It's an opportunity to grow the Metroid series. Nintendo may estimate that Metroid's success will be good enough in tandem with Switch Sports and strong third-party support with other bigger titles coming soon after that it's still an ideal scenario as a launch title, and it could do a great job of providing the message they want on Switch 2. An evolution of the Switch experience, improved power, but also better online support, and an environment that is conducive to strong third-party support as well. Something like Metroid Prime 4 might appeal to a lot of the audiences that are not sure about what their next console will be. I'm not talking about your hardcore PlayStation or Xbox fans, but those kinds of fans that are always unsure whether they're going to buy an Xbox or a PlayStation because the kind of games they buy are the same regardless of console. Call of Duty, your NBA 2Ks, things of that nature, those mainstream kind of games. And if Switch is going to get those kind of games, maybe Nintendo wants to put out Metroid Prime 4 to appeal to that audience, while they also see that their other typical offerings are there as well. So when you think about all of this, perhaps Metroid Prime 4 Beyond might be the most ideal fit. Is it going to be the biggest seller? It's probably not going to do better than Mario Kart or 3D Mario, but it might still do extremely well based off our expectations of the series, and that might be exactly what Nintendo needs to kick off their next generation. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.